Those of you who don't know me, my name's Tim, and today I'll be demonstrating how to make eggplant bake. Now, I have to tell you this is another recipe which we have modified from the original, which consisted in a big fat slab of cheese and a few other bits and pieces. But today we've made it using a different method, but I believe actually tastes just as good, if not better. So we're going to begin. I've got two pans out here today. And we're going to begin with just getting some oil in that pan and putting, it says 1 onion. I had 2 smaller onions, so don't be too exact about these things. I'm just going to chop these up and get them sautéed. Of course, if you had a large onion, that would be fine too, but I don't like to leave half an onion in the fridge. So fortunately, this is one of those recipes where if it's not exact, you can kind of do it about right. Okay, so I'm going to get that in there. It's a little bit high, so I'll turn that down a touch. And again, we're just going to saute these until they're soft. Okay, at this point I add the salt, about a teaspoon of salt, but I'm going to use half of my salt in with my onions, and then the other half I'm going to sprinkle through the recipe. Okay. There. Now just while they're sautéing, I'm going to chop up the eggplant. Now those of you who haven't cooked with eggplant before, this is something we never grew up with, at least not where I grew up. I don't know if they were too expensive or just didn't exist. But people who have come from a meat diet say that using eggplant, it's a very savoury taste, and they say it's a good substitute for meat. Okay, now of course it won't taste like a steak, but it's just a very substantial and rich food to eat. As are all the vegetables I'm using today are Mediterranean type vegetables, you'll notice. Okay, so I'm just going to chop this up now. The nice way to do this is to slice it into rounds that are about, I don't know, 1.5 centimetres thick. The fast way to do this is just to chop it any which way you like, throw it in a pan with some oil, and it does tend to cook faster, but it just doesn't look the same when you put it in a baking dish and bake it. So I got my pots mixed up, and it doesn't matter how we do this because it's all going to go together. So I'm just going to transfer these over here. Eggplant can be a little bit heavy on absorbing the oil, so don't drench it in oil. You just want a little bit in the bottom of your pan, and then you place your eggplant in like that. It'll soak up the oil pretty quick, and we're just going to lightly fry it on each side. Okay, now my wife doesn't like making this recipe because it's one of those things that you have to watch. It's time consuming. Frying eggplant takes a wee while. So if you're the sort of person that gets distracted, maybe this is not the recipe for you. But at this point, I would just leave this on a sort of reasonably, sort of medium temperature, and then I would go and do something else, and then I'd come back and check on it and flip it over. Okay, so that's the sort of recipe it is. Now, at some point in here I'm going to add some courgette, so I'm going to just chop those up now in preparation. You don't need to pre-cook the courgette, and it does cook kind of fast. So just in chunks is fine. Someone asked in a previous demonstration what the recipes cost. If you make this recipe at this time of year, you'll get the eggplants sometimes for $1.50, sometimes for $3 at Pack and Save. And you know, the courgettes, you probably got some in the garden because they grow pretty easily, right? What else have we got? An onion, a few tomatoes. You'll pay maybe, what are tomatoes at the moment? Maybe $2 or $2.50 a kilo, something like that. If you make this recipe in the middle of the year, in winter, you'll pay $6 for an eggplant if you can get one. You know, and maybe $20 for a kilo of courgettes, so you probably pay about $10 for those. So the price increases exponentially depending on what time of the year you make it. Don't want to burn these. So about this time of year, as I said, these were a few dollars each. Tomatoes, you could probably make this recipe for under $10. Maybe, about $10. And you know, it will fill a good sized baking dish, which I need to get from the kitchen. I have the glass baking dish, please. It should be under there somewhere. You know the one I mean, Liz? No, just pass me that one there that you've got. That's the one. Thank you so much. So it'll make a good sized dish about that size. Right. I think we're kind of about right here with these. They're gone clear and they're starting to brown a bit, so I can pull those out of there. And these eggplant here are kind of done. I've got the rest of them ready to go. Well, some of them. Just slice off the ends. Just get doesn't taste good with your finger in it, so you just be careful with the knife. Okay. Right, so now that that is kind of done, you notice that these are starting to go, I don't know if you can see that in your screen, sort of that colour. You're starting to see them go a darker colour, like they're almost soggy. Yeah, that's because they're cooked enough. Okay, so I don't want to fry it till it's till it's black on both sides, you know, that tastes awful. Now what I'm going to do is put this in the base of my dish. This dish may be a little bit small for what we're doing here. Like that. Just squeeze them in. I'll keep that one aside. See, that one's gone quite brown. Put a bit more oil in, get the next batch going. Now the thing to be careful of with olive oil is it has a low smoke, a low burn point. So you notice here I've got this pan because I'm using gas and it's a little bit up and down. You want to keep the temperature kind of even and not kill it. Okay. So now I'm going to put my onions in on top. Could have put the tomatoes first, but that's fine. Get that one going again. Bit more oil in there. And get the rest of my eggplant cooked. Okay, just going to put a light bit of salt on these. Okay, spread that over there. Now I'm going to take some tomato, slice that into sort of 1/2 centimetre slices. You don't want your tomato too thick, it takes a little bit longer to cook. because I'm going to cook this in the oven, not in the pan. I'm just going to layer that on top of here. A few more pieces like that. I need a little bit more. Now this tomato was not grown in my garden, so you'll notice it, it has a bit of a whitey sort of look to it. It doesn't look like something vine ripened, does it? Okay, so they're typical supermarket tomatoes, with a bit of a hard core down the middle. Not as sweet as what you would get out of the garden. So you may need to add a little bit of sweetener to it. And what I am using today is date syrup. Seen that at the supermarket? Yeah, don't recommend white sugar. Yeah, but something a bit more natural like this. For those of you who eat honey, you can put a little bit of honey on it. I'm just putting a tiny bit of that there, just to kind of sweeten up those tomatoes a little bit. Now here I have some Dolmio sauce. Might need my wife to open this for me. There you go. Done. Okay, now there's a wee trick to this. Because the tomatoes and the zucchinis will release a bit of water into the mixture, I'm going to add a little bit of maize cornflour. Now the proper way to do this, let me just turn these over. Can't wait for me to finish talking. Don't burn yourself. I'll turn these at the same time. They look like they're kind of on the right side of cooked. Okay. Now the proper way to do this would be to put some of this in a little bowl with a teaspoon of corn flour and mix it around till you get all the lumps out. For those of you who cook in a hurry, I took a few spoons out of the top of the jar and a spoon in here, and I'm using the long one just so it fits. And I'm tipping a bit in here. Oops. And then I'm going to get my spoon, this one will do. I'm going to mix this around a little bit. If you have a kid helping you in the kitchen, they might enjoy doing this job. Now if you don't mix this around, I'm just sort of pressing this against the side of the jar because I don't want to get a lump of corn flour, unmixed. And then once you think you've got all the lumps basically out, because it will mix up a bit, I put the lid on, make sure you're not standing on white carpet, and go like this a bit. Alright, and that's kind of about right. And what this does is it just helps to soak up some of the water that's going to be released from the tomatoes and the zucchinis in your recipe. There. I'm going to just tip this. I've said spoon out onto the top, but you really just want a decent covering. If you're making a dish about this size, you'll use a whole one of these and just use half on the first layer and half on the last layer. Okay. Now, that seems to have had a... Right. So that's it. If you don't want to go and splash out on one of these, because they are about $2 or $3 a jar, you can just use chopped tomatoes and herbs, yeah, and a bit of salt, and just make your own pasta sauce. But as I said, I like to cook in a hurry, and so something like this, it's easy. You don't want to make every single part of your recipe if you can get something that's convenient like that. Okay, now without looking at my recipe, I have here a tin of lentils. Again, I'm using the Dolmio ones because they tend to be softer in the tin. If you want to get your own lentils, you can buy dried ones and you can soak them and boil them up and keep them in the freezer. That's what my wife does. But as I said, I'm getting a tin of lentils, drain them off, and then just sprinkle them over the top here. about evenly as you can make it. And again, I'm just going to get my spoon and smooth that over. All right, 2 small courgettes, sprinkle those on top. I've got the right size dish here. Then we'll put some more of these on. Just put that down like that. It will, when it cooks, kind of sink down a touch. I've got this dish a little bit full. I could have used a slightly bigger dish for this recipe. Take a few of these out. Just do that one in the middle. Maybe one more there. Now, we'll put another layer of tomato on. It off. Nice tomato. Now what you don't want to do when you do this recipe is to leave your lentils exposed on the top. They'll turn into little bullets that will break your teeth. So we learned that the hard way. The tomato is a good topping for it. And as I said, I'm going to just add a sprinkle of salt on top of that. And then a little bit of date syrup, just to, I would normally use honey at home, but since this was here I thought I'd give this a go. And then the remainder of this on top. And now, all the people who have done something like this before will rightly tell me that this might boil over, okay? And that's a very good observation and probably will come true. So you don't want to be responsible for the cleaning up, all right? Make sure you've got someone to help you with this recipe. Okay, now I can give that a wee shake and it will, as I say, it will sink down a bit, but that sauce on top will also seep down. The tomatoes will flatten and they'll release their juices, and hopefully the cornflour will help to absorb some of that. Now, you'll know when it's cooked because the tomatoes will shrink. You know how they do, they go a bit dehydrated. Now, in terms of toppings, there's a couple of ways you can make this look nice at the end. If you're on a budget, a sprinkle of turmeric, just lightly over the top. In fact, we'll do that today. If you are familiar with nutritional yeast flakes, then they give a nice cheesy flavour, and I think they're probably superior to a bit of turmeric on it, okay? But that just makes it nice and golden brown. Now, if you're not on a tight budget and you want to splash out, it does kind of almost double the cost of your recipe. So be careful with this. It is not cheese, it's vegan mozzarella cheese, and there's a variety of different kinds of cheeses you can get nowadays. Some use coconut oil as a base, some use pea protein. Yeah, so this one I got from Pack and Save. There's a vegan section at Pack and Save. There's one at Countdown as well. Probably New World has it, but they're the two main places that I go. This will sell for about $6.50 or $7.50 depending on where you go. Okay, so that's if you're not on a budget. If you are on a budget, turmeric or nutritional yeast flakes will do the job. If you're into a bit of adventure, you might choose to make a cashew nut sauce to kind of sprinkle over the top as well. Alright, so then I'd put that in the oven for say 40 to 50 minutes in a medium oven, and you don't want it obviously boiling over the sides, but just keep an eye on it. As soon as the tomatoes on top shrink down, you know the ones inside will be cooked as well, and bring it out, let it stand for maybe 20 minutes to cool down because it holds its heat with the tomatoes, and you'll notice it will firm up, and then that way it's good for serving. Yeah, when it's too hot, it'll still be a bit too liquid. Serve it with, we're going to serve it today with penne, but you can serve it with rice or potatoes as well, and it's a nice rich dish to go with your meal. All right, I hope you enjoy making that one, and good luck.